I'm going to start off, and I'm going to give you rather a long quote from Edward Arger, because I think that needs to be on the record, and also for people who may be watching. It's rather long, and you probably know it anyway. So, this country has a long tradition, which long predates the European Convention on Human Rights, or the EU, of championing and setting higher standards on human rights. The Human Rights Act 1998 reflects that and gives further effect to the European Convention in our domestic law, and we're not considering amending or repealing it. Both the political declaration and the white paper make it clear that our future relationship with the EU should be underpinned by our shared values of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and this includes our ongoing commitment to the European Convention. Now, before that, this committee has been hearing noises off that say maybe we're not so keen on the European Convention, so this might be seen as being reassuring, and would like to hear from all of you as to whether you do find it reassuring.
Not really, because it basically simply reflects a statement of current intention, and as you've just mentioned, we do keep hearing noises to the contrary. But in any event, even if it were the settled intention of the government today not to repeal the European Convention, that of course can't bind future parliaments. And so there is always the possibility that there will be support for repeal of the Human Rights Act, and that would have post-Brexit a very significant effect on protection of human rights in this country. So I don't find it very reassuring.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill.
I agree with Marie on that. Well, I am similarly not reassured. Again, because it comes down to the structural constitutional point, as Marie has said, that we have a very, very thin notion of a constitution in this country. It wasn't helped, in fact, by the Miller decision of the Supreme Court, which seemed to say, really, we don't have a constitution in a prescriptive sense, that which ought to be done, but simply a descriptive sense. That is what we do now. And if your only principle is that there is parliamentary sovereignty, limited only by the idea that Parliament cannot bind its successors, then you have no structural protections whatsoever. The point about EU membership is that it did have a different notion of constitutionality, that it did require fundamental values, fundamental laws to be respected. Now, in that sense, because of this thin notion of sovereignty, of constitutionality in the UK, that was seen as a foreign imposition. But it's the way that constitutions work in every other country, that there are fundamental values, fundamental laws, which have to be respected by all organs of government, the judiciary, the government and parliaments. And that seems to me that we are losing all that, and that therefore these immediate political statements as in, well, we're not thinking of repealing the Human Rights Act today, but who can say what another parliament might do? So I see no reassurance in that at all.
I suppose I can only really say I agree with Marie and I agree with Aidan. But it's also not an unsurprising statement. None of the EU's international agreements with its European neighbours has been concluded without some underlying commitment to the European Convention on Human Rights. So it's perhaps unsurprising that a minister who is part of a government whose manifesto commitment only committed its government to the European Convention on Human Rights during the life of this Parliament, thus perhaps temporarily limiting their own political commitment to that separate international and incredibly significant regime for the protection of human rights in Europe, is perhaps unsurprising that ministers are perhaps trying to send not only political assurance to this Parliament, but political assurance to the parliaments in the other 27 member states.